Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
I'm John Strum, and this is RealTalk MS. It's August 6th, and we have a lot to talk about. And today, I want to start with a quick history lesson. Jean-Martin Charcot was born in Paris in 1825. And he's considered by many to be the father of modern neurology. In 1868, Professor Charcot made the very first diagnosis of MS, and his clinical pathological definition of multiple sclerosis is still used today. Professor Charcot spent most of his career working and teaching at Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris, where in 1882 he established the first neurology clinic in Europe. Since 1969, the Charcot Award has acknowledged Professor Charcot's pioneering work by recognizing the lifetime achievement in outstanding research into the understanding or treatment of MS. Once every 2 years, the MS International Federation announces the recipient of the Charcot Award, and my guest today is the newly announced recipient of this year's Charcot Award, Professor Catherine Lubetzki. Like Professor Charcot himself, Professor Lubetzki works and teaches at Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris. And while Professor Charcot established the first neurology clinic there, Professor Lubetzki not only heads the Department of Neurological Diseases at Salpêtrière Hospital, she also coordinates the Salpêtrière Multiple Sclerosis Clinical Research Center. But before we get to my conversation with Professor Catherine Lubetzki, there are a few other things that you should know about. Most people affected by MS know that MS attacks the myelin sheath that protects nerve fibers in our central nervous system, which leads to faulty communication between this network of nerves. And that faulty communication leads to disability. But people sometimes overlook the fact that in addition to causing demyelination, MS also kills brain cells directly. It kills the brain cells in the area of the brain known as the neocortex, the wrinkly area on the brain surface that manages our higher cognitive abilities. Over time, the loss of these cells causes the brain to shrink, and that process is known as cortical atrophy. But the specific processes behind this shrinkage, this cortical atrophy, haven't been clearly understood. Scientists didn't fully understand whether all kinds of cells in the cortex were being destroyed or only certain types of cells were being affected. And this was a question worth exploring because if it turned out that it was a certain type of cell that was being affected, then perhaps therapies could be developed that would protect those cells, which would protect against this cortical atrophy and ultimately delay disease progression. So a research team from the University of California, San Francisco, Cambridge University, and the University of Heidelberg used a cutting-edge genetic technique called single nuclei RNA sequencing, which is something you don't have to remember unless you're a science nerd like me. So they use this technique, this single nuclei RNA sequencing, to study the genetic makeup of individual brain cells. The researchers studied a wide range of cell types taken from post-mortem brain samples from MS patients and compared these cells to brain samples donated from people who didn't have MS. And they found that a specific type of brain cell, called a projection neuron, was particularly vulnerable to damage in the MS patients' brains. In healthy people, projection neurons are involved in communicating information between different parts of the brain, so it's possible that damage to these cells can affect cognitive abilities among people living with MS. The research team also found that it was the antibody-producing immune cells in the brains of MS patients that were causing the damage to these projection neurons, and that new discovery furthers our understanding of how inflammation in the brain causes MS to progress. One future outcome of this breakthrough might be a new therapy targeting these immune cells so that the projection neurons are protected and MS doesn't progress. This discovery is a result of developing cutting-edge genetic tools that allow for research at the cellular level that's never been possible before. It's technology driving science forward, accelerating discovery, and to me, that's a perfect definition of progress. If you'd like to check out the details of this research, I'll include a link in today's show notes. Based upon the successful outcome of a phase 3 clinical trial of ponesimod, it's likely that next year we'll see the approval of another oral disease-modifying therapy for relapsing remitting MS. The details of the clinical trial will be announced next month at ECTRIMS, the largest MS research conference in the world. But a press release from the Janssen pharmaceutical companies of Johnson & Johnson announced the positive top-line results from the phase 3 trial, which evaluated the efficacy and safety of ponesimod compared to Aubagio. The clinical trial involved over 1,100 participants who were followed for about 2 years, and the primary outcome that was measured in the trial was the rate of relapses that these participants experienced. Secondary endpoints of the study included fatigue, disease activity as measured on MRI scans, and disability accumulation. The data from this clinical trial will be submitted to the FDA and the European Medicines Agency as Janssen seeks approval of ponesimod for treating relapsing remitting MS. We'll be able to get into some of the details about ponesimod once the details of the clinical trial results are shared at ECTRIMS. There's also a second phase 3 clinical trial that's currently underway, comparing the efficacy of ponesimod to Tecfidera. So we'll keep you updated on the results of that clinical trial as ponesimod continues to make its way to market. And if you'd like to see Johnson & Johnson's press release announcing the positive phase 3 clinical trial results, you'll find a link in today's show notes. The course that MS can take in any one individual varies. For some, MS can be a relatively mild disease, taking years before someone experiences any serious symptoms. At the other end of this spectrum is a disease course that progresses rapidly, leading to the accumulation of significant disability. This particular form of MS is sometimes referred to as malignant MS, or highly active MS, or aggressive MS. One published study defined aggressive MS as a disease leading to an EDSS score of 6.0 or above within 5 years. And that 6.0 EDSS means that an individual requires some sort of assistance walking. And that particular study found that 8.6% of the people living with MS were living with aggressive MS. Another study set the criteria for aggressive MS as having an EDSS score of 6.0 or greater within 5 years, high disability by the age of 40, and rapid transition to secondary progressive MS. I'm personally familiar with aggressive MS because, by anybody's definition, my wife Jean has it. And just a couple of weeks ago, a research team from Australia published a retrospective study that suggests that aggressive MS can be identified by means of early clinical markers. In other words, it's possible for a neurologist in clinic to predict with some reliability that a patient may develop aggressive MS before they actually do. And why does this matter? Well, by definition, aggressive MS progresses very rapidly. So those first 5 years from the time of diagnosis are extremely important. If a neurologist knows that someone is more likely to develop aggressive MS, they might recommend starting them on a more aggressive disease-modifying therapy, maybe not one that you would generally start with, but a more powerful drug with a greater chance of slowing down the expected disease progression. So after examining more than 2,400 medical records from MS patients, the research team developed a list of clinical and demographic markers that, taken together, indicate that a person is more likely to develop progressive MS. The list includes patient variables, including sex, age at the onset of MS, their baseline EDSS, and disease duration at the first visit to their neurologist. Now, they also put together a list of what I'll call disease-related variables. That is, analyzing the patient's recorded MS relapses within the first year of diagnosis to determine the number of relapses, bowel and bladder symptoms, cerebellar signs, incomplete relapse recovery, steroid administration, and hospitalization. Taken all together, these variables produced a profile of someone who is among the small minority of MS patients who are likely going to develop aggressive MS. The results of the Australian study were confirmed in an independent analysis of patients from the Swedish MS registry. And while retrospective studies have certain built-in limitations, gaining a better understanding of the early clues that someone is likely to develop more aggressive, more disabling MS seems worthy of more study and consideration. If you'd like to review this research, I'll include a link in today's show notes. One of the aspects of MS that we frequently talk about is that about half of all the people living with MS are likely to be diagnosed with clinical depression at some point. If you're a regular RealTalk MS listener, you've heard me say that depression gets in the way of everything. It can keep you from going to your rehab appointments. It can keep you from going to appointments with your neurologist. Depression can even keep you from starting or staying on your disease-modifying therapy, and we know that in itself can lead to faster disease progression and a worse quality of life. Well, we might be able to assign yet another negative outcome to how depression can affect people living with MS. Results of a newly published study indicate that anxiety and depression among people living with MS can negatively impact their cognitive skills, specifically their nonverbal memory and attention and processing speed. Now, further research needs to be done here, but this study shows that mood can be linked to the worsening of specific cognitive skills instead of just a general or overall worsening of cognition. And understanding this relationship can lead to more precise treatment for people living with depression and MS. If you'd like to review the details of this study, I'll include a link in today's show notes. I have some very encouraging news for unpaid family caregivers that I'd like to share. Last month, Connecticut and Oregon joined New York and New Jersey in granting paid time off to family caregivers. Beginning in 2021, workers in Connecticut will receive 12 weeks off to care for a new baby or a seriously ill family member or loved one, or to deal with their own serious illness. The new benefit will be funded by a 0.5% payroll tax, and benefits will cover 95% of low-wage workers' pay up to $900 a week. And if you're curious, Connecticut also has one of the most inclusive definitions of who counts as a family member or loved one. The new law's definition includes siblings, grandparents, or any other blood relation, or, and I'm quoting now, any person who is the equivalent of a family member. Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont said, and I'll quote again, "We all agreed on the need to pass this landmark support for working families so they don't have to choose between the job they need and the family they love, or their own health." Now, the family leave bill in Oregon is the most generous to date. It pays low-income workers 100% of their wages when they're off, with weekly benefits capped at $1,215. To qualify, an applicant has to earn just $1,000 in wages in a year. And Oregon is the only state that guarantees that if you take time off from your job to care for a new baby or a seriously ill family member, your job is guaranteed to be there for you when you return. Now, the Oregon Family Leave Law doesn't go into effect until 2023, giving the state time to build the infrastructure to administer this benefit and to begin collecting a small payroll tax, not to exceed 1%, to pay for it all. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see paid family leave become an issue in the 2020 elections. All of the Democrats seeking the 2020 presidential nomination are supporting the Family Act, which is proposed federal legislation sponsored by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand that would fund paid time off for new parents and caregivers through a small payroll tax. So we'll continue to watch this issue in the coming months. Meanwhile, just last month, the Iowa CARE Act went into effect. There are an estimated 300,000 family caregivers in the state of Iowa taking care of loved ones at home. And this new law is designed to ensure that hospitals provide these family caregivers with all of the necessary information that they'll need to provide the appropriate care for their loved one before that person is discharged from a hospital. The last thing that you want is to see a caregiver feeling overwhelmed by their responsibility, or worse yet, not knowing what they're expected to do. You'd think that it makes so much common sense to include this kind of detailed instruction to the caregiver as part of any hospital's discharge planning. But that doesn't always happen. Well, at least beginning this past July, we know it's happening in Iowa. And perhaps the Iowa CARE Act can serve as a blueprint for other states, so that the 43 million family caregivers throughout the U.S. can feel a bit more confident and comfortable in their role as their loved ones are discharged from hospitals. And while we're talking about family caregivers, I want to take a moment to share some of the work that I'm doing with Embracing Carers, a global initiative led by EMD Serono in collaboration with leading caregiver organizations around the world. And Embracing Carers is designed to increase awareness, discussion, and most importantly, action about the often overlooked and underserved needs of unpaid family caregivers. As a longtime caregiver for my wife, Jean, this work is very close to my heart. And I can tell you that one of the things that a caregiver never has enough of is time. That's why I wanted to get involved in introducing people to Time Counts, a call to action by Embracing Carers, an opportunity for people to literally give some of their time to support a caregiver in their lives. If you'd like to see a short video that gives you some insight into my own caregiving story, I'll include a link to that video in today's show notes. And if you'd like to join Time Counts, you'll find a link in today's show notes as well. One of the challenges of caregiving is that caregivers don't always know where to turn when they're feeling overwhelmed. And sometimes it can just be hard asking for help. You can fix that by joining Time Counts, acknowledging a caregiver in your life, and offering them some support. If you're able, I hope you can share some of your time and make a huge difference in a caregiver's life. And since we're talking about making a huge difference in someone's life, it's the perfect time to introduce you to my guest, the recently announced recipient of the Charcot Award, Professor Catherine Lubetzki. When you think of Professor Lubetzki's lifetime achievement in MS research, when you consider her broad body of work, there aren't a lot of people dedicated to MS research who have made such a significant difference in the lives of people living with MS. Professor Lubetzki's pioneering work in furthering our understanding of demyelination and remyelination serves as a foundation of so much of the MS research that's taking place around the world today. She's only the second female professor of neurology in all of France. She's the first woman to lead a neurology department in France. And now Professor Lubetzki is the first woman ever to be recognized with the Charcot Award. In a moment, we'll meet my guest, Professor Catherine Lubetzki. Every 2 years, the MS International Federation awards the Charcot Award, recognizing lifetime achievement in outstanding research into the understanding and treatment of MS. And this year, the recipient of the Charcot Award is Professor Catherine Lubetzki, who's being recognized for her very significant contributions to better understanding the underlying disease processes of MS and her specific focus on furthering our understanding of demyelination and remyelination. Professor Lubetzki has more than 250 publications to her name and has led, served on, and even founded a long list of national and international scientific and funding boards and committees. She serves on the executive committee of the MS International Federation's International Medical and Scientific Board, and for the past 9 years, she served on the Medical and Scientific Board of the French MS Association for Research. Professor Lubetzki is a member of the International Progressive MS Alliance Scientific Steering Committee and also leads a research group at the Brain and Spinal Cord Institute. She's a founding member of the French Brain Council and serves as a member of the Executive Committee for ECTRIMS, the European Committee for Treatment and Research in Multiple Sclerosis. Professor Lubetzki is a professor of neurology at Sorbonne University and head of the Department of Neurological Diseases at Salpêtrière Hospital, where she also coordinates the Salpêtrière Multiple Sclerosis Clinical Research Center. It's my privilege to talk with Professor Lubetzki today, and it's my honor to call her my friend. Professor Lubetzki, congratulations on being honored for your remarkable body of work, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for this very, very nice introduction, John. I'm so happy and I'm so honored of these awards. So thank you so much.
Your career achievement speaks for itself, but how did you get started down this path? What was it that first interested you about MS research?
This is an important question. So I think that rather early in my training, medical university training, I got interested by neurology and by neuroscience. So I knew that I wanted to work with people affected with nervous system diseases. And then I think that what really oriented me towards the multiple sclerosis is the meeting with the multiple sclerosis patients. And I was first moved because it was a disease it is still a disease affecting mostly young people. And I was also not only moved, but also so interested by this complex disease. And I must say that this choice was made rather early in my career. And then, I'm so happy to have done it because during the last 15 years, I would say there have been so many advances in our understanding and treatment of MS, although there is still a lot to do.
Full disclosure, you and I know each other through serving on the International Progressive MS Alliance Scientific Steering Committee. And I'm wondering how you would describe the role, the work, and the importance of the International Progressive MS Alliance.
So I think that the real force, the real strength of the Progressive MS Alliance is to focus on one single topic, which is progression in multiple sclerosis. It can be either progressive MS since the beginning of multiple sclerosis evolving towards progression. And so what is very unique with the Alliance is, first of all, that it is gathering people from all around the world, so trying to make cross-fertilization between the research group, the clinical group. But maybe what is also the major added value of the International Progressive MS Alliance is that in all the committees of the Alliance, there are both scientists, clinicians, and people affected with MS. And I think that the discussion between clinicians, researchers, and patients is so fruitful, and allowing so much cross-fertilization. And I think that this is rather unique.
Just a few years ago, you were part of a presentation in the UK with a very interesting title. It was called Multiple Sclerosis. Has research got us to the end of the beginning or the beginning of the end? How would you respond to that question today? Where are we in terms of progress in MS research?
Yeah, I think that, there have been a lot of advances. And as you well know, the development of all the immunotherapies, which are targeting the inflammatory component of the disease, have been very efficient. And that And these therapies, which are evolving, yearly, there are new drugs, have been able to reduce the relapse rate. And this is very important. And it has completely changed the way we announce the diagnostic of MS and the way we treat the patient with MS and the way the early phase, at least, of multiple sclerosis is held. So there have been many changes. The problem is that despite those major advances, we are still facing a challenge. And this challenge is to understand and to treat progression of multiple sclerosis. Because although some patients with the immunotherapy will stay very well, some patients, despite strong immunotherapy, will nevertheless enter the secondary progressive phase of the disease and experience progression of their disability. And understanding what is the basis of this progression and understanding what are the therapeutic targets to prevent the progression of disability is really key. So we are at the end of the treatment of the inflammatory phase, although there should be new drugs which would be more efficient with less side effects, etc. But there have been major advances in this part. But what concerning the progression of the disability, there is still a lot to do.
I understand that you were only the second female professor of neurology in all of France and the first woman to lead a neurology department in your country. And now you're the first woman to be recognized with the Charcot Award. Those achievements alone are remarkable. But how does it feel to be that woman whose scientific and career achievements are already being recognized as historic?
Oh, you are too generous, first of all. So the first woman who was a professor of neurology in France is Marie-Germaine Bousser, and she's working in stroke disease. And as you may know, she has been just won this year the Brain Prize for all she has been doing in genetic vascular disease. So she has been a very important figure in the field of French neurology, and she was also directing a department of neurology. So concerning myself, I cannot say more than what you said, but I think that being a woman working in neurology, but being a woman working with important responsibility, I think we have a duty towards young generation. And I think that I was lucky to be able to develop my career both on my career and to combine both the professional and personal life. And I think that maybe my duty is to train the young generation on neurology, on multiple sclerosis, but also train the young female generation and tell them that they should not be afraid of going on and to try to get good position, because it's possible to have an interesting career and at the same time combine happy professional and personal life. So I would tell my junior female colleague, don't be afraid and go on and follow your passion.
Well, the Charcot Award recognizes a body of work, a lifetime achievement. But I know you're not finished achieving. So what's next for you? What projects are you currently working on?
There are different projects. First of all, there are some local projects with the increasing of the size of the Department of Neurology in Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital. So this is a huge project which is going on for the next few years. And concerning MS more specifically, I think that at the moment with our team, because I must say that, this is a very important honor for me, but it really recognizes the work of a whole team. I am very lucky to coordinate a research team together with my long-standing friend and colleague Bruno Stankoff. So we are coordinating this team, which is gathering clinicians and scientists, and we are all working in the same direction. So it's an honor for me, but really it's the recognition of the work of a team. And so it was a little digression, but what's next? So I think what's next are the translational projects that are ongoing. And we are at the moment, we are just at the edge of beginning a few new projects which are really trying to prevent the progression of disability. These are early trials, so we have to be very cautious. and because we'll have to first see the result on a small population of patients, and if those results are positive, then we'll go for larger trials. But what is what's next is now translation.
Professor Catherine Lubetzki, the committee certainly knew the right person, the right recipient of this year's Charcot Award. Your work in furthering our understanding of the underlying disease processes of MS, of the interactions between myelin and axons, has been groundbreaking. And your role in blazing a path for other women in your field has been remarkable. Congratulations once again, and thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you so much, John. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
That's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. If you have just a minute, it would mean a lot to me if you could head over to Apple Podcasts, and I've made that super easy by creating a simple shortcut. You just have to go to realtalkms.com/Apple. And once you're there, leave a rating and review for Real Talk MS. It'll take you less than 5 minutes, and it would mean so much to me. So please visit realtalkms.com/Apple. That will get you to Apple Podcasts, where you can leave a rating and review for Real Talk MS. I'm John Strum. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.